Now you combine that with another thing that Donald Trump has done or not done. The Federal Reserve Board has got currency swap agreements with a whole roster of central banks. I mean, they haven't got the Reserve Bank of India involved. I don't know whether that is the fallout of demonetization or whether, I mean, I don't know, or maybe Prime Minister Modi needs to make a call to President Trump. I do wish we would be part of that. There are many banks, Bank of Japan, Korea, all kinds of banks are there. One bank is conspicuous with its absence, the People's Bank of China. In other words, there is no currency swap window for the People's Bank of China. In other words, if there is a kind of a run on the dollar, the People's Bank of China will have to burn through its reserves. It is on its own. You understand?
Right.
That is a declaration of war.
Yes.
Calling for a bigger dollar, a stronger dollar, is a declaration of war. And in my opinion, it's a matter of time.
Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. Today I have the pleasure of company of Professor M D Nalapat, and we are going to discuss some very interesting developments vis-a-vis the crude oil and what it is going to do to the different countries that are in play. Professor Nalapat, welcome to PGurus channel.
Thank you, Sri.
So Professor Nalapat, let me lay out the context for you, sir. Yesterday, the West Texas Intermediate, WTI crude, was actually trading below zero for some time. And this is, I think, the May futures. And then in June, again, it came back to positive because I think the idea was that they think that there's going to be no economic activity in the next 6 weeks. And therefore, the demand for crude is going to be low, whatever be the reasons. But it is showing us a trend that crude is going to be low for a long, long time. And this has serious ramifications, especially for crude-only exporters such as Saudi Arabia and many of the Middle East countries, also to some extent Russia. So how do you see this thing? What is going to happen to US, China, Saudi Arabia? And you are the geopolitical expert, sir. Perhaps you could help us unravel what is going to play out in your opinion.
You see, Sri, if you remember, we've been talking for quite some time about the rivalry between China and the United States.
Yes.
And we've been talking this when people in America and China were still talking about the G2, America and China working together, etc., etc. Only in 2017, when Donald Trump launched the trade war, was it very clear that this kind of a bonhomie, that age is over. It's not going to happen. So today, what happens is, in the past, you had the United States and the USSR. You had a Cold War between them. Now, a Cold War is a war in which you don't use kinetic force against the other. If you remember, in 1962, there was the Cuban Missile Crisis. I mean, we remember in India 1962 because of the Chinese,
aggression,
movement into our territory.
Yeah.
But the reality is that the Cuban Missile Crisis was also in that year. That was, the world was an eyeball away from actually seeing a nuclear war between the US and China.
Right.
And given the kind of nuclear doctrines, very crude nuclear doctrines in both Washington and Moscow, I mean, somebody may have taken the wrong call and then sent a volley of nuclear missiles. And then as soon as they were coming, the Americans would have sent another volley. And frankly, we would have been very close to a nuclear winter. It would not be, let's be honest, even any nuclear detonation, the impact is there across the world finally,
True.
But certainly on nearby countries. It's not just the two countries that are fighting a nuclear war. In my view, today, you have a new Cold War between the US and China. And in my view, there is a risk of a kinetic war between the US and China, whether it be in the Korean Peninsula, whether it be across the Taiwan Straits, whether it be in the South China Sea, in multiple locations, or whether it be, for example, China is now very active in the Indian Ocean. China is there in Qatar. China, frankly, is much more closer to Iran than India is, and frankly will be because of the decision of the government to go ahead with the Trump boycott and stop buying Iranian crude at the time when sanctions were imposed. So, the point today, the whole formation of NATO was formed basically as to prevent the Soviet Union from attacking Europe. NATO was formed basically to ensure that there would not be a Soviet attack on Europe, because the Soviet Union could have rolled over the whole of Western Europe, in a matter of weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks. They would have, even the American troops there would have been rolled over. The only thing preventing Russia was the possibility of a nuclear conflict and the reality that, any and all means can be used. Now, the French understood this. They built their nuclear weapons. The British built their nuclear weapons. So given that, the nuclear war scenario became a little less likely. And ultimately, it's true that the Soviet Union disintegrated without firing a single shot directly at the United States. Today, the challenge facing the world is to prevent a kinetic conflict between the US and China. That's why, for example, I've been calling for an alliance system. Now, that alliance system will basically be designed to act as a deterrent to any particular country. I'm not going to name any country, but any particular country going to war in such a manner that the other country, that is the other superpower, gets provoked into picking up the gauntlet. In other words, China already is very, very powerful. Xi Jinping especially has ramped up the military. He has modernized the military, and he has brought in cyber and bio and so many other things. So I don't believe anybody is going to go and attack China. No, the United States certainly is not going to attack China. But what happens if China decides that they can launch an attack, let's say reunification of the Korean Peninsula, like MacArthur did, but in reverse, launch an attack on Taiwan? My personal view is that if you launch an attack on Taiwan, then the entire the Indo-Pacific defense mechanism of the United States, Japan, and other countries become so weak that it is impossible to avoid reacting to such an attack. So then you have the South China Sea. Again, it's a place where there could be a lot of potentiality for kinetic war. A few days ago, you remember Russian Sukhoi 35 fighter came very close to a US surveillance plane. Let's assume they had, hit each other. Sometimes, you have a certain logic, things start getting out of control. So what is needed is to have a deterrent system. But what I'm telling you this is, the need today is to prevent an all-out conflict between the US and its allies and China and its allies, because China has also got its alliance system. Iran is there, Venezuela is there, Russia is there, Pakistan is there, and some other countries are there in the Chinese alliance system. Now, why am I going to all this long explanation before we come to oil? The fact that what is happening in the oil market, Sri, is after 1971, it shows that the United States today is no longer the dominant player globally in the world oil market that it was. In 1971, remember Nixon removed the link between the gold and the US dollar.
Yes.
He had to do that. And I must say that's, because if people came back and redeemed the gold, their dollars, there would be no gold. And then that would have placed a very severe limit on US spending. Nixon did that. And then, from then onwards, the US, especially the petrodollar, the entire petroleum market is basically in US dollars. So that has given the US a great leverage in the oil market. Today, you're seeing a situation in which the US is being clobbered. And more importantly, the market is just not bothered about the US. Donald Trump, the president, has invested a lot of energy in trying to bring Russia together. They've had oil cuts agreed in May. But, he's got zero oil. So the reality is, the significance of zero oil is the fact that we are now seeing the end of US domination of the global oil market, if not the global energy market. That is the significance of zero oil. And one reason for this is that now you have a new superpower on the block. Previously, it was the Soviet Union that was acting as a constraint on American power. Now it is China, the new superpower, acting in a constraint on American power. So I would say what we are seeing now after 1971, the end of US dominance in the global energy market.
And that's a very skillfully put, and you've traced a lot of things together to make your point, sir. It is my belief that we are going to just take a small detour to another topic, because China is trying to take a different route. And you brought it up in one of your articles, as well as in a hangout, that China is pledging its future based on the digital currency. And that came true yesterday. They have released it in 4 cities. So they're going to start using it inside China, to start using it in digital currency payments. And this is going to be probably rolled out in the future for the rest of the world. So here is the thinking that goes behind it. I have read a lot of articles about this, and they've been very smart in terms of disseminating it. Fortune wrote about it 2 weeks ahead of time. On 7th of April issue, they already had this thing that it's going to come out with it. And it also said why China is doing this. And I would like you to throw some light on this next observation that I'm going to make. So here is the thing. People have been viewing yuan with suspicion, because it said that it's going to peg the currency at a certain value for 30 plus years. And it's been more or less within a small band. So most people used to trust the US, which had a deal with the Hong Kong dollar in 1992. And most of the initial commerce flowed into mainland China through the Hong Kong dollar route. And then what happened was, slowly China started building its own ports, its own infrastructure, and the importance of Hong Kong dollar has been going down. However, there is one clause there where the treaty between Hong Kong and US gets reviewed every year. Now, if I were Trump, and if I have a way to change that thing, perhaps that is where Trump would start to try and curb China's influence. Because in my opinion, what China is trying to do is they want to completely kill the Hong Kong dollar, and they want to tell the world, if you don't trust yuan, use our digital currency, because you can enter what is called as a smart contract, which is like an escrow, where if somebody does what they promise they do, the payment automatically happens. What are your thoughts on this dynamic?
See, the China has found Hong Kong useful for a lot of reasons. And among that is the fact that a lot of money transfers can take place with the rest of the world from and to Hong Kong or via Hong Kong. Hong Kong provides a very good window into the market of convertible currencies, a window which is not there in the Chinese mainland.
Right.
So Hong Kong has been very convenient for China. And that's one reason why the Chinese have been fairly, if I may say so, forbearing when it comes to tolerating pretty massive kinds of dissent in Hong Kong. Because if the US, cuts off the link with Hong Kong financially, then what happens is that particular window is shut. And the Chinese say, okay, let there be, a lot of trouble and tension in Hong Kong. Let the Hong Kong people understand this is democracy. I mean, your businesses are shutting down. Tens of thousands of people are coming on the streets. They're shouting and screaming going on, all for something that can never happen, which is, freedom from China is never going to happen. You've got the PLA there, right there. And you have all the various Chinese agencies all there. So they believe that the Hong Kong people overwhelmingly will understand that this is not a feasible errand. And finally, they'll come to their own conclusions about the movement and hopefully for them about democracy in that. So I think there's a logic behind the fact that a tough leader like Xi Jinping has taken a very forbearing attitude towards Hong Kong. Having said that, I want to say that, look, yes, they have been working to a plan. They've been working for digitalization. They have gone into blockchain technology very aggressively. and they've been buying gold in a very large way. They've been working to a plan, as we discussed long back. I'm quite certain they are betting on a dollar reset. Now, till very recently, the United States was basically thinking that, oh, we are king of the walk. I mean, nothing is going to happen to us. You remember in some, let us say, in some, prides of lions, you have the lion who's basically the lord of the pride, and he goes swaggering around, and suddenly you have a competitor coming, jumping on him, almost tearing him to bits, and the poor lion has to go skulking away, and the competitor then comes and takes over the pride. I mean, frankly, the United States was like that particular lion, fairly sleepy, very relaxed, and there's no real threat in the horizon. Yes, there is that particular lion lurking in the background, but I'm not very worried about that lion. I'm a much bigger lion. Look, Donald Trump, and like I said, I'm very unhappy with many of the things Donald Trump did. Frankly, including his love affair with Erdogan. I don't know where that comes from. But I'd like to say one thing about Donald Trump. He has understood that the United States and China are at war with each other. This is something that the Chinese leadership has long ago understood very quietly. That's the Chinese way. They don't advertise what they're doing. They don't proclaim what they're doing. Even their own people may not know what the leadership is thinking or doing, but they have a strategy, they have an objective, they have a plan. The Americans, you guys are a lot more transparent. I mean, fortunately for all of us, you're a lot more transparent, and you have all the, I would call it a virtue of democracy. But I want to say, Donald Trump has understood this. How? For one thing, he started talking about a strong dollar. Till now, Donald Trump, the businessman, was talking about a weak dollar. He wants a weak dollar so that US can export goods across the world. All of a sudden, he's talking about a strong dollar. What does that mean? It basically means, now you combine that with another thing that Donald Trump has done or not done. The Federal Reserve Board has got currency swap agreements with a whole roster of central banks. I mean, they haven't got the Reserve Bank of India involved. I don't know whether that is the fallout of demonetization, or whether, I don't know, or maybe Prime Minister Modi needs to make a call to President Trump. I do wish we would be part of that. There are many Bank of Japan, Korea, all kinds of banks are there. One bank is conspicuous with its absence, the People's Bank of China. In other words, there is no currency swap window for the People's Bank of China. In other words, if there is a kind of a run on the dollar, the People's Bank of China will have to burn through its reserves. It is on its own. You understand?
Right.
That is a declaration of war.
Yes.
Calling for a bigger dollar, a stronger dollar, is a declaration of war. And in my opinion, it's a matter of time. I think in the next Trump turn, because believe me, I think personally, between whatever my views about Trump and loving Erdogan, frankly, between Biden and Trump, there's no doubt that Trump is way better than Biden. I don't know what you guys in America are going to decide, but between Biden and Trump, I think there's no doubt Trump is way better. The fact is, he gets it, and he's taking action on that. Of course, it's bad news to a lot of emerging economies. People are, let's say, who have taken loans in US dollars. They have to pay much more, because they have to pay much more rupees. And right. Unfortunately, you have the Reserve Bank of India, North Block, just, acting like, who's that chap who went to sleep and did a Rip Van Winkle? I mean, you have the RBI Rip Van Winkle, you have North Block Rip Van Winkle, fast asleep while the rupee is falling. So what happens? You take a loan in dollars, you've had it if there's a strong dollar. And Trump has said, we want a strong dollar. Look, this is a declaration of war. The Chinese have had an undeclared situation of a challenge. The Americans now are, by refusing the PBOC, the currency swap window, and basically by calling for a strong dollar, the Americans have picked up the gauntlet and said, yes, we are at war. So This petrodollar thing is frankly one of that. The Chinese are now all over the place buying oil and saying, look, we're not going to pay you in dollars. We're going to pay you in RMB. If you don't like that, okay, sell your oil somewhere else. Sell it to America. And, you know, the Americans are the biggest suppliers, producers of oil. So don't forget, Sri, the oil dollar link came when the Americans were the number one buyer of oil.
Right.
Today, they're the number one supplier of oil.
Correct.
That's a very different ball game altogether. So the Chinese are now basically trying their best to break the link between the petrodollar, the dollar and petrol, and break the dominance of the US in the oil market. And what I can see, they've succeeded. Frankly, what I can see from what's happening now, they've succeeded.
Now, so let's play this thing out, shall we, Professor Nalapat? A year from now, what do you say? Is there going to be a HKD, or it's going to be completely supplanted by the digital currency of China?
No, I would say, so far the Hong Kong dollar is concerned, I think it's only a matter of time before the Hong Kong dollar gets into a peg with the RMB, with the renminbi. It's only a matter of time, and that time will be when the Chinese decide they don't need that window. They don't need to use, for taking money back and forth, dollars back and forth. They don't need the Hong Kong window anymore. Already they're developing Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Shanghai, etc. to be much bigger. Even Nanjing is now trying to compete with Hong Kong. So frankly, I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. Most likely, may not be 1 year, maybe 4 or 5 years, but it's going to happen. There's no doubt about it.
Sir, this has been a most engaging and insightful conversation that we have had in a long time. And I'm just amazed at the clarity with which you've been able to dissect so many moving parts around the world. And I'm sure, since you've been proven right so many times, that whatever we are predicting here is going to come true. And it is actually a suggestion or a hint to people who may have some investments going in a certain way or the other way. And you can actually make up your mind based on what has transpired in this conversation. As always, a pleasure to have you, Professor Nalapat, and thank you very much.
Sri, I just want to say that, look, they don't count the United States out yet. Now, I hear people saying China is down. China is not down. The United States is down. It's not down. Believe me, there's a lot of fight left in the United States, especially under President Donald Trump. So don't count the United States out at all. This is a battle. It's going to be bitter. It's going to take years. But I can tell you, it is not going entirely one way at all. And so far as you're saying nice things about me, yes, by sheer good luck, or practically almost all my predictions seem to have worked out by sheer good luck, if I may say so.
Professor Nalapat,
I'm not saying country, I'm saying system.
Yes.
So the people are wonderful, the country is wonderful. The system should have been changed in 1947.
Well, you are actually echoing Rudyard Kipling's observations about India. He said that incompetents hang out longer in India than anywhere else. And viewers, whether this war is going to be fought on air or ground or on the internet, you are almost sure to get a ringside view of the happenings here at PGurus channel. And please do subscribe to our channel and please donate to pgurus.com. Thank you very much for listening. And Professor Nalapat, I look forward to more such engaging conversations.
Thank you, Sri. Thank you.